Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have April Tinhorn here with me today. April is the CEO and Chief Connector of Tinhorn Consulting, a marketing firm with a diverse Hualapai, Navajo, and Chinese heritage. She's passionate about challenging stereotypes of Native Americans. Welcome to the show, April.
Good morning, Tim. Thank you for having me here on the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast. It's nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. So can you give us a snapshot of your business right now?
Yeah, we've actually just celebrated our 14th anniversary. And in the past year, we've rebranded from Tinhorn Consulting to Tinhorn Cx because we realized that what probably like many of your listeners, life changed after the pandemic, right? And we had to refocus, think about how we wanted to move forward. And so we've been, we realize at the heart of what we do, it's to really nourish that business wellness through our indigenized customers experience. And we do that through our strategic planning, our customized trainings, and our tribal connecting services.
Okay. Excellent. What's behind the name change for CX? Can you give some insight into the meaning of that name, CX?
Yeah, CX is it's customer experience,
Okay.
but I also wanted to not spell it out because I could always say it's connections, like give yourself a little room to wiggle and grow.
Sure. Okay. I like it. Sounds good too.
Mhm. But originally too, I wanted to make it like C with an exponential X because I was like, oh, I'm nerdy too. I like to say I'm a reformed computer scientist turned accidental business owner. So
Okay.
yeah, in my
Okay.
private life, I was a programmer. And
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of entrepreneurs had previous lives before they just stepped out and got uncomfortable and took on some of those risks associated with it. Can you tell us a little bit about that transition? That's sometimes scary, right? To leave behind maybe a W-2 position.
yes, yeah, definitely. There is some security and comfort in knowing you're getting paid in set increments, whereas entrepreneurism, it's just that like jump and see what happens. I would say that crossroads for me was I like I said, I was a computer scientist and I had taken actually a position to lead an effort with the Seminole Tribe of Florida. And it was to help their Native Learning Center, which provided life skills to their tribal members and beyond. Um, and it was, I think, in the first year and a half, 2 years. And so I had come on as a consultant to come up with like a 5 year strategic plan. And at the end of that, they offered me like a deputy director position
Okay.
and to implement the plan. So, what I realized from that experience was that, just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean like that's a great fit or also where like your purpose and your heart is. And when I really leaned into that, I kept thinking about, you know, that this is like 2010-ish timeframe. I was getting contacted by different tribal governments asking if I did web development because they wanted to make value-based purchases and have their tribal
Oh,
government websites made
okay.
developer, but they weren't finding web developers at that time. And so that was when my company when it was born. It's like I know there's a need out there.
Okay.
Uh, I knew it wasn't gonna be the end all be all. I always had an idea it would be beyond websites, but at the time I wasn't sure. And that's why we first started out as Tinhorn Consulting LLC.
Okay. And so what's sort of the range of services you provide now?
So we had to really focus, like for us,
Okay.
things changed. I'll just say things really changed when the pandemic hit because our clientele tends to be indigenous led nonprofits, tribal governments, and uh, corporations that are trying to work with tribal communities. And so when before pandemic hit, we would go to a lot of our tribal clients. And when pandemic hit, a lot of our reservations were locked down. So essentially
Right.
the delivery method was, shot. And I had to really take that rest and pause. And I think all of us have encountered that in life, like when we think like we've lost everything. But I think that's where like your mindset and your faith and your purpose really comes into play about like your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And I knew I was raised by a single mom as she had raised me, like when you're given gifts, there's responsibilities that come with those gifts. And I grew up on the Wallapai Indian Reservation, which is the northwest part of Arizona, and the Grand Canyon. And so I knew that like my purpose was beyond just me. I knew I wanted to utilize my gifts and help, help my community. And that's actually when I paused and I was like, those my technology, that IT self of me, I'm like, I think it's time to lean into that during the pandemic because maybe I physically can't go and provide strategic planning services or trainings, but I had heard at that time of this online tool called Zoom, and I was like, we probably can create space and connections and still have, safe spaces and community to still facilitate strategic plans or to still, do trainings. But in the beginning part, it was just to create space for us to be in community and kind of just
Right.
talk about what was going on. So,
Excellent. Okay. Okay. Very cool. Very
Mhm.
cool. Speaking of nonprofit marketing, I just had Todd Vigil on the podcast recently, and he has a company called Ely Hub where he provides he helps nonprofits with the Google grant. Uh, uh, so if you're not familiar, yeah, Google gives nonprofits a certain budget for advertising.
Um,
Each month, and so it's significant, and he helps people utilize that. So that might be something worthwhile for you to as a resource, right? And he has a number of other resources available, but that's kind of his main focus. But he wants to be a hub for nonprofits for taking advantage of such programs.
that's always good to know, resources to help my clients because they're
Yep.
helping, actual tribal members most of the time.
Right. Okay. Excellent. You mentioned Navajo and Chinese heritage, and it reminded me of when I was in graduate school. One of my friends, well, actually, they got married. We went down to they had the service down out near Moab, Utah, but uh, she was Navajo and he was Chinese. And so it was an interesting service, right? It was a mix, right? She wore the red dress, and they had we ate the cornmeal, I think it was, and all sorts of stuff. It was a mix of traditions. It was is that a common sort of heritage combination?
No.
Okay, so yeah. Well, how did that make it into your model or
Well,
focus?
I guess you could look at US government policy and how they dealt, the US government, as a nation to nation, how they viewed other tribal nations. If
Okay.
you think about history, there's been different ways. Assimilation is, I'll just talk about mine. So at one point, the US government wanted to make tribes, farmers, and then they were like, okay, this isn't working for some. And they're like, well, let's do another policy. Let's assimilate Native Americans. And so, like I said, I'm Wallapai from the Grand Canyon. And
Mhm.
during my grandmother's, her early formative years, the government was I guess, assisting, and moving folks to, like, the Bay Area, and that's where my grandmother met my grandpa, who was, my
Ah,
worked in a Chinese restaurant
there you
as
go.
dishwasher. My future grandpa was the chef, I guess, and,
Okay.
they had children, one of them being my mom, and then, so I say I'm a product of assimilation.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
Okay. Very cool. Okay. And Uh, let's talk a little bit about what comes easy to you that others find challenging, right? To play into your strengths and in your space. Can you speak to what sets you apart?
What comes easily to me is creating, like, with groups of folks, like, to create a safe space where I can help facilitate that safe space to allow all the participants to finally become comfortable enough to use their voice if they choose to address kind of the hidden or yeah, the elephants in the room
Okay.
that are part of the business show up in the unwellness, in your
Right.
businesses. And it's
Okay.
like we have to first be aware of it, give it a name, discuss it before we can ever come to addressing, possible collaborative solutions of how to,
Okay.
address it. So
Okay.
I've had that ability like since I was in second grade. I who knew like what I would get in trouble for in second grade is what actually a lot of people hired me for. Because if you remember, I don't know how your grade school was, but we had like the little desks, and I
Okay.
remember we put like four of them together to make a table, and I'd
Yep.
get done
Yep.
homework really quick. And I love people. I love talking to them, playing. When I was little, playing with my friends. So I just give at my little table, give everyone my answers so we could all be finished because we couldn't all play until everyone was done.
Right.
Yeah, that got me
Right.
promoted to 3rd grade, in 2 months, and, I guess it's been accelerating different things in my professional life since, that ability.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you bring up an interesting point too in working with certain companies, depending upon the culture and stuff. Um, Getting you have to put on, like, I guess, a therapist hat a little bit and try to make sure everybody is clear on where they're at and where they're going before you can start planning the route forward.
Yeah, and to bring everybody some buy-in, and to be a part of that, folks, if they help build something, they're more
Yes.
likely to support it versus being forced to use something they had no part in.
Yes, that's a great point. It's an important tool to include everybody, and yes, they're much more with the program and supportive if they've had some say. Absolutely,
Yes.
was a great tip and point. Okay,
Mhm.
so what's sort of your moving forward? You've had a lot of impact in the companies and places you've worked with previously. Do you have any big goals moving forward? Like,
Well, I would say this year we've been investing in our operations, and
okay,
looking for, the repeatable patterns, run really tapping into utilizing automation and looking again at the customer experience and looking at my internal consultant team as well as my customers about like ways onboarding them to give them both sides awesome, like experiences. So once we're at the part now where we are implementing those systems that have been created, and that is to really moving forward. I'm looking at ways. My business is very. I think you kind of get already a little feel of it. Tim is like my business is a lot of like me, like probably for a lot of like entrepreneurs when we start out, and I'm looking at ways where I can still grow, but still keep that Tinhorn Cx experience for, multiple maybe tribal facilitations going on at the same time where I'm not the one facilitating it. But we spend a lot of time coming up with like the Tinhorn like CX experience and that we can help our facilitators and trainers deliver that. And it doesn't have to be person dependent, but it would be, company culture dependent.
okay, okay. And do you have any specific sort of initiatives or projects coming up in the next 6-12 months that you're excited about,
Yeah.
or maybe even goals? Okay,
So we were awarded from the state of Arizona. It's a tribal training and consultation contract.
okay,
And so we literally just sent off they requested like, proof of insurance, your different levels. So I'm really excited for that. How it's a new
Congratulations. Cool.
Thank you. It's a new initiative, it's for all. It said it potentially could be for all of the state's employees and their partners, in that area of tribal consultation, of tribal training. So that's at the heart of what we love to do. Another one further down the pipeline where we were awarded is through the Arizona what is it? Arizona Community Association, ACA. Um, the broadband effort, for the broadband for the state of Arizona. Um,
Okay.
my company got Scope 7, which is going to be dealing with tribes, but they have to like build and implement all the broadband in the state before our initiative Scope 7 comes up. So it's going to be probably a couple of years, but it's kind of interesting, to be awarded a contract, but no, like you're not going to see it for
Oh,
definitely not. Like I know it's not going to be next year, probably be like I said, a couple of years down the road.
sure.
Yeah, and
Longer term project for sure.
yeah, and then immediately we're gonna be working on an electric charge, station project for community outreach for one of the Southern Arizona tribes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Those are some broad scope projects, right? Which take time. I'd say I don't have a lot of time on the reservations. I mean, maybe hunting, but usually it's driving through when I'm going to other places, and uh, there's not a lot of service, cell service, signal service. I imagine when things are spread out over such vast amounts of land, that can be incredibly challenging. Uh, I'm curious as to those initiatives. I mean, Starlink and things like that seem much more useful right now and more immediately impactful. Can you share a little bit more about what the scope of those projects are? Is I assume it's just to better connect the tribal lands.
Well, part of, with the whole pandemic, and there was all from the federal government, there was ARPA money for, the US, especially for rural regions, right? We saw that all the time, of the lack of reliable connectivity for sure. And, our 574 federally recognized tribes throughout the US and also in rural America, pictures of kids like at the top of a hill, with their laptop trying to like do online school or huddled, like after hours outside of McDonald's, because that's the only connectivity spot they have in their local radius. So with the federal, I believe it's ARPA monies, there was just this huge deployment to create broadband, to reliable
Okay.
broadband. And so it's federal monies, and they were given to the different states to implement broadband in their state. And so ACA, I believe, is the recipient. I don't know if they're the recipient, but at least they're implementing the broadband
Okay.
for the state of Arizona. And
Okay.
in
But
Google that, I cannot speak beyond just this general thing,
no.
but
Okay.
that's where I know the funding source comes from, and I'm sure they have scope one through six is addressing, implementing that broadband, and then
Okay.
after it's been deployed, and with your, like with the tribes, they're all sovereign. The 22 tribes of Arizona are sovereign nations, and their leadership, their governments get to decide, different things. So it's consultations with the state and each tribe. When you talked about connectivity, just like on social media and with different friends, especially with small business owners who do business on the reservations, that is the lack of reliable connectivity does affect business. I
Oh,
know
sure.
when I was back home, just even something like, a Facebook marketplace, right? I bought something from someone local and we couldn't our Zelle wouldn't connect because it kept timing out, so
Mm,
I paid her, right? And I'm like, how
right.
many times does a small business owner in in an area that doesn't have reliable connectivity? When do they lose a cell? How many?
Yeah, that's inherently prohibitive for sure.
Mhm. And so, yeah, I have been hearing folks that are back home that are saying they use Starlink because it is. I've heard really good results even out at
Mhm.
Grand Canyon where I live. I mean, I would say though, it's always the startup costs and then the maintenance fees too, right? So
Sure.
we'll see how that all plays out.
Sure. Is that an inherent challenge in the tribes of not bracing technology? Is it trying to, I don't know. Is it a, are there some tribes that, that they don't want to be uh, 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 too technologically dependent, or do they embrace it fully and want more of it? I don't understand uh, how that works, and particularly considering how spread out things are, it seems to just very challenging. That might just be the biggest problem.
Mm. Tim, that's beyond this podcast. That
All right, all right,
and also just I guess generally speaking is
okay,
not not just one tribe that speaks for all because they're all different.
sure.
Think about even like in China, right? Like all their different like all the dialects, all the different
Oh,
regions
sure,
different, and it's the same for um, Native American tribes. Different languages, different government systems, different beliefs. So I would just say, from my opinion, a
hmm
it started out not necessarily like not a tribe. I don't even think we had an option, is how I'd put it, because think about the infrastructure costs.
hmm right,
And if like my tribe has I think there's like 1,500 people living in Peach Springs, and like the Kingman, Arizona is 50 miles away, is like the
hmm
largest town. And think about the costs per, I don't know if you say mile or what they measure broadband in, but to go
right,
from there to Peach Springs, that's very cost prohibitive. And
right,
there's not a lot of, for businesses, there's not a lot of incentive. Will they even make their return on the infrastructure for like 15, small community of 1,500? And
right,
that I believe that there is federal money set, and it's not unique. Other rural areas are like that too. But
right.
tribes, they have on top of that, they also have then all the government, tribal government red tapes as well. So
Okay, okay, yeah,
if you're really interested, I know that ASU is doing a Wiring the Res conference in February
oh,
2025, and they talk about future facing issues like beyond. Like I remember
okay,
them talking about, gosh, at least 4 or 5 years ago, I feel like they were already talking about what does tribal sovereignty mean in, the virtual space, because
ah,
tribal sovereignty is all land based. And even they were talking sort of too about AI back then, and how there's these issues now about, licensing your likeness, right? Your face and your voice and with AI, right? And I feel like they were talking about that in a tribal sense years ago before I heard it in mainstream media. So yeah, just for your listeners, there's a whole nother world out there of different.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And as you said, just the rural challenges in general with technology are still there, and they're not cheap, but they are making progress anyway.
But I also wonder about that too, because I spoke at an international women's business conference in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. Want to say maybe in the last 5 to 7 years. And like when we were out there, Ulaanbaatar is a major metropolitan area, but our host took us out like where they have their yurts, and
Mhm.
they're, it's rural. Like you drive forever for just like one little yurt. You can't really see anyone else. But when we were there, like I had 5G connectivity. Like I was going Instagram live on my
Wow.
cell phone. And so like when I spoke, I was on a tech panel at the time, and like the government's chief technology officer was sitting on this side, and then like one of the major one of I don't know, like the one of the three telecom companies for their country was sitting on this side. And I explained what I just said. I'm how is that possible? Because I can't do that back home on my reservation that has like it's more populated than, that area. And he said, he's like, we didn't start from scratch. We learned from everyone else's mistakes. He said, so this is Mongolian fellow speaking. He's like, when we became a democracy, I believe, because yeah, that was what in the 90s or something. He said we didn't have to start out like with old technology. We looked
Mm,
at what was available and we started there. And I was like, so is it subsidized or is it competition or how is this possible? And I
right.
think that was lost in translation for me. But that what I remember was that we didn't have to start from ground zero and we learned
Okay.
everybody.
Okay.
And I
Yep.
think that's
Yep.
something to think about as an entrepreneur too, right? As you come on board, you don't have to start at, I guess I'd say like research, right? Research and see what's happened, lessons learned in whatever your industry or your area you're looking at, and you can start from like the current progress point, not like
Right.
from a couple steps back.
Right. Okay. Okay. This is a question I like to ask guests on the show is what do you wish you would have known sooner about building success in your career?
I I wish I had known in the beginning that your success metric doesn't have to be mine. And that has led to a lot more satisfaction and freedom. What I mean by that is at my core, I'm a social entrepreneur. Obviously, I want my business to do well, but it's equally as important for for the community that I'm working with that they come up to, and also for my client, like a triple win. And that necessarily doesn't mean it's the top metric for me is money. Obviously, you
Right.
need it to do things, right? It's an
Right.
enabler, but I just think about like the impact. That's like a metric I have impact in community. So I was trying to use someone else's metric for a long time in my business, and now I don't. Like one of the success metrics, entrepreneurs out there, you can make it whatever you want. But one of them
Yep.
for my company is that I have a 12-year-old daughter. She was born. My company's 14 years, so she came along 2 years afterwards. But one metric is that I don't miss any of her milestone moments, and I assess that annually.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Yes. There's one of my sort of measures of success is being able to live by my values, and that's part of it is family. And there's a Buddhist. It's more about being satisfied versus success, but it's having uh or what is it? It's having fewer wants than your haves. Right. It's not materialistic anyway, is my point. Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Right.
not
Okay. Well,
saying
thank you.
money, but I still, money is good, and yes,
Oh,
but
it lets you do the stuff. Yes, for sure. For sure. Yep.
to
Yep. Yep. But defining what success means to you is very important.
Mhm. Yes.
Absolutely. Great point. Great point. And particularly when you're dealing with clients, right? You got to be clear on what their goals are and what success of any particular project it means to them.
Mhm. And I think that's a great conversation to have in your intake because what I have found is if our values in that area aren't aligned, then we may not be the best fit for each other. And it's okay because
Right.
whatever client is meant for you, like they'll find their way to you, and those that aren't will find their way out. And I figure like because I've done this before, like there's um, my business isn't for everyone. And that was another thing I've learned now, it's okay. It's okay to fire clients, and it's okay to not take on clients if we're not in alignment in the beginning,
Right.
and it's usually value-based, decisions. So, but that allows I see it as if, I can tell, like, our businesses aren't aligned, it's best to like refer them to someone else or let them know, because then that's opening up space for those clients that are in alignment with what Tinhorn CX does, and for us to work
Sure.
together, and we get to amplify each other's efforts.
For sure. Yeah, another good piece of advice. Thank you. All
Welcome.
right. Well, April, if people want to learn more about Tinhorn TX or connect with you, what should they do?
They should go to www.tinhorncx.com, and they can also follow us and hopefully join in on the conversation on our Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube channels. And they are all at Tinhorn CX.
Okay. Excellent. Sounds great. Thank you, everybody, for listening, for watching. Thank you very much, April Tinhorn, for joining me today. Appreciate you sharing your story and insights into success and marketing and with all of the different tribes, as well as throughout Arizona. Thank you.
Tim, and I appreciate you, and I know you're talking about I think prosperity comes from like service leadership, so I feel that this podcast is an example of that. And thank you for highlighting other entrepreneurs, because it's going to reciprocate, right? And we get to help
Yes,
each other.
for
And
sure. Excellent. Thank you for that. All right. See you later. See you next time, everybody. Bye.
thank you. Later.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.